In this video, I'll be showing a technique I sometimes use for blocking in with a projected image. In this case, I'll be using a panel that I've already painted on. It was done several years ago and it's quite dry, and it's never been varnished. It's worth reusing because it's a nice piece of linen mounted to a good quality plywood. I have in mind to turn it into a loosely painted landscape. With the projector on, I give everything a light coat of my medium, which in this case is Liquin Fine Detail. I don't want it to be thick, but I want a thin wet coat over everything so that my brush strokes will flow on smoothly. Rather than trace my image with a pencil or chalk or charcoal, I'm simply going to block in shapes that I see with a loaded brush. I use a sheet of white paper in my left hand to briefly see the projection better the moment before I place my stroke. For the sky in this image, I've mixed up a bluish white. The color doesn't really matter at this point. I'm just looking to record the shape. I should say that I'm also trying to record something close to a good relative value with a hint of the color that's involved. I've used this technique a bunch of times now, and I would say it's probably most appropriate for something that's going to be quite loose, a landscape or maybe an urban scape, where there isn't a lot of important detail, because it's pretty hard to make precise marks in semi-darkness with a brush. My reference photo, by the way, is one that I took while staying in Lucca. My wife Nancy and I have made many trips there. It's my maternal grandfather's hometown, and when we go, we usually lease the place for about a month and visit relatives, and I end up taking a lot of street photography for use in painting later. I have painted on site before, but I haven't really enjoyed the process that much or liked the results that much, so I tend to come back to the technique that I used as an illustrator, which is to simply work in this studio from reference photos. Many people will say that it's not possible to get good color when working from photographs because the photographs don't show the same color that you would see in person, and I'm sure that's true. But it's also true that seeing color in person with your own eyes and then mixing the paint to record that color are separate things, and that most plein air attempts don't actually do a very good job of recording the colors you actually see, and that a good camera will record an image with plenty of color information that you can interpret later in the studio. This is especially true with modern high-resolution digital cameras. It is probably hard to see in the small insert shot that you see on the screen, but the digital photograph I have actually has quite an amazing variety of different greens in it. And with concentration, I can tease these out. and reinforce them in the studio when I mix my paint. Anyway, when the projector's on, I feel a little rushed, and I think that's a good thing. I really don't want to spend a lot of time with the projector on. It's not because I think there's something wrong with it. It's just that I don't want to give myself too many things that I have to preserve as I continue to work on the painting. And I have to admit, I'm also a little leery of the day when my projector bulb next burns out, and I'm hoping to forestall that for as long as possible. Typically, when I use a projector, even on a larger piece than this, I'm pretty much done within 15 minutes. That's about all the tracing or recording of shapes I want to do, because I want to leave things kind of open. That'll help keep the painting feeling fresh, and for the painting I do, it's not really detail intense anyway, so there's no point in recording a lot of little tiny shapes. I really just want the feeling. One thing that can be fun about painting over old images is that sometimes the painting will show through and create some interesting variations on new translucent paint that you're applying. And so it's good to be on the watch for happy accidents that you may want to preserve. I know it's probably pretty hard in this video to see what's happening, so I've used Photoshop to grab a still and produce a simulated version of the progress I've made to this point. It looks pretty crazy, but I think you can see some of the masses starting to emerge. Although I'm not really trying to record any details, I'm going to give myself a few landmarks in this little fragment of cityscape that's back there on the horizon. And when the lights come back on, I can use those to navigate. I can use those as landmarks to essentially paint from that point forward. I got lucky with this photograph in that I got a last trickle of light across the curving wall at this point. Otherwise, it'd be just another mass with no relief. The trees on the wall are very dense at this point, and one can almost design the placement of little holes in it to show the sky coming through. Well, what's really needed now to get rid of that face staring back at me is to block in the value of that distant mountain. Here again, the paint mixture doesn't have to be precise. I just want it to be slightly darker than the low sky and kind of bluish, purplish, and I'll keep it semi-translucent, so if that woman's face wants to show through in a few little places, maybe it wouldn't hurt. By the way, those mountains are the beginning of the Apennines, and just a few miles up the valley in that direction, one can still see the fortifications of the anti-tank barriers that were laid by the Nazis during their retreat north in World War II. So here's another image showing our progress. Blocking in those mountains helped quite a bit. I'll indicate some of these high grasses that are around the channel there in the moat area. It's not really important that they be specific or terribly accurate, because almost any version will be credible. And I'll be tuning it up with the lights on later. I shouldn't have said moat. It's not really a moat. It's a grassy field that lies between the walls and the ring road around the city. The built-up areas outside of the ring road are relatively modern. A lot of these houses, like the one I'm blocking in right now, were probably built in the early 20th century. And a lot of them are actually very beautiful buildings in an Art Nouveau style. Just going to make a few more precise marks to give me the shape of those trees, and I think we'll be about ready to turn the projector off. So here we go, lights back on, and I've got a monitor off to my right showing the original photograph, and it's time to try to pull this together so it makes some kind of sense. But I think already one can see that my most important masses and shapes are already blocked in, and I've gotten the benefit from the projected image. From this point on, it becomes just traditional painting. A lot of the dark red from the original image is obviously still showing through, and while it would be fun to leave a good amount of that, the truth is most of it's probably too dark in value to survive in the new composition. So most of that is going to get painted out. But if I keep my colors kind of translucent, it may sort of peek through here and there. As it is, the bottom of the channel there in the foreground will probably not need to be painted. It can just remain that very dark shape, and that part will survive. Most of this is some shade of vegetation. Though I'm really liking that weird shape in the big tree, it's really going to interfere with showing the form of it, so most of that's going to have to go also. And a lot of the red in the line of buildings it's going to have to be at least partially painted over, because it's too dark. It's too distant to be that dark. I've sped up the footage now, obviously, because I think I've made my point about the projection. With these greens, I'm trying not to overmix them and have them include a lot of off colors so that there's some variety created. And I'm not using the paint terribly opaquely, so some things can show through, and I'll either keep them because they're working or I'll paint over them because they're not. Although the wall is mostly a reddish brick, I think the red that's there right now is probably too intense. In reality, it's fairly grayed out and almost purplish in places, so that'll probably have to kind of go away. In normal practice, I try to keep as large a brush as I can for as long as I can, and then only resort to a small brush when I've really got something that needs to be a small mark. And then once I've got the small brush, I just try to use it for only as long as it's needed and not keep it in my hand and keep making tiny marks all over the place, because if there's too many of those, they'll all lose their power. So I'm going to pretty much wrap up this video now. I think I've made the point I intended to make. I'm going to spend another hour or so cleaning this up, mainly trying to get some edges in those distant buildings. And here's where I stopped. Looks pretty good. I'll probably repaint it at some point in the future, but we'll leave it here for now. Thanks for watching.